120 seconds. 110 seconds. 100 seconds. 90 seconds. 80 seconds. 70 seconds. 60 seconds. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
My friends, once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J.C. McCauley, along with the champions of talk. This morning we have in the studio and joining us by Zoom, talk champions, Dr. Maya Bowen and Cacique. Cacique, how you doing there, sir?
Good morning, J. Stan. Good morning. Everything is great, man. I'm very happy.
You're very happy. You look happy.
Yes, things are going well for me. You know, I just want to let our family, our community out there know that the Taino Chess Club is open for business at 1020 Farmington Avenue in Berlin. So stop by and play some chess, buy a chess game, chess equipment, play a game.
Sounds like a plan. Dr. Maya Bowen's in the house. Dr. Bowen, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent on this Wednesday, which happens to be March 1st, which also happens to be Women's History Month 2023. And I'm going to have to take you up, Cacique, on that game of chess because I was taught by my mother, was taught by her brother, and I definitely have to stop by.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Dr. Maya. Yes, and in reference to Women's History Month, I have to say that once again, this is another one of these labels that people give a month, like, Black History Month. How can we put the history of women and all their accomplishments in one little month? I don't.
I got the answer.
Yes.
You can't, but it's all about recognition.
That's what's
So,
up.
in terms of the recognition, we'll take that part and let it ride on that. Other than that, every single day we're all making some sort of history.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like that. I like
Beautiful,
that.
Dr. Maya. Thank
I
you
like
for
that.
that.
I like that. I like that. Every day we're making history. I like that. That's right. Because every second goes by, it's the history you just made.
That's right, man.
Make your own history.
And we're doing
Do
it right
something
now,
great,
right here.
Right here,
Morning
right now.
conversation.
Right here, right now. Conversating. All right. Well, let's get the conversation underway. It's time to get our talk on. And we got a special guest to help guide us through some of this conversation. Not a stranger by any means, but it is a tradition here at Morning Talk that they invite the inviter of the guest have the esteemed honor of introducing said guest. So, Cacique, you got the floor, my friend.
Well, Stan, it gives me great pleasure, man, to introduce someone who I consider a friend and a colleague. This brother has been magnificent in our community, worked in education, taught thousands of our kids, has been involved in, politics, but more like the social fabric of our community, and making sure that he's held, a lot of the systems accountable. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the former educator and legislator, and now he's an educator again, the magnificent brother Ed Vargas. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Lou, and thank you, Stan. And thank all of the people that work so hard to make Access TV such a great success. And this morning talk with Stan McCauley is a great program, keeps the community informed of what's going on, and it's a pleasure for me to be here as a guest.
Always a pleasure to have you here as a guest.
So, Ed, you have worn so many hats in your career, from the Democratic town chair to the state rep, former educator, union member, union vice president, union president, and now you're having, what is your new title, Ed? Share that with us, please.
Well, recently I accepted an appointment as the Governor O'Neill Endowed Chair for Public Policy and Practical Politics at Central Connecticut State University. It's a position that was created and endowed to honor the memory of Governor William A. O'Neill, and it's a position that the university created as an endowed chairmanship to bring somebody on board who's had a lifetime experience on civil rights issues, human rights, politics, and a well-rounded individual that can bring something to that position and help mentor a new generation of leaders for our communities.
Man, that sounds like a really exciting job. So you were elected and then you resigned and accepted this position. Is that how it went, Ed?
That's correct. The O'Neill chairmanship rarely opens. People who hold that position usually hold it for many, many years. And as a matter of fact, the first person to hold that position was Governor O'Neill himself when he retired as governor. And the people that have held it, like I said, for many years. So there's rarely a chance to apply for it. I had just been reelected for a sixth term, which would have been the next 2 years, had I been sworn in on January 4th. But when Don DeFranzo, the former mayor and senator from New Britain, who also served as a state commissioner, announced that he was retiring and that the position was opening up, I saw an opportunity. Unfortunately, because it's considered part of the executive branch of government, state employees are considered, most of them, as being part of the state of the executive branch of government. And the legislature obviously is the legislative branch of government. And our Constitution prohibits anyone from serving two branches simultaneously. Once I applied and the position was offered to me, I had to tender my resignation. And but it's a great transition because I started, as you mentioned, as an educator, 35 years in the Hartford public school system, teaching in our high schools, and during my last few years as lead teacher of the adult education programs, teaching immigrants from around the world how to speak English. So my love has always been education, and I served 5 terms at the state legislature, and now I coming back to my first love and vocation, which is as an educator.
Talk a little bit about the bench. I call it the bench. Monday we had a former mayor from Atlanta on, and I asked her the same question, because your new chair, dealing with tomorrow's leaders, if you will, urban America, and who traditionally runs urban America. Even though sometimes black and brown people may be in positions of power, they're not really in positions of power. They're kind of like there. So what needs to be done to build the bench so that tomorrow's leaders look like urban America? It seems as though there aren't young people in the pipeline.
I agree with you, Stan. That's one of the reasons I found this opportunity to. I had, first of all, let me explain one thing. I had recently been renominated for a 6th term to represent South Hartford, and now a small portion of West Hartford, the Elmwood neighborhood. And it was something that bothered me because, I am a senior citizen, and I've been trying to bring along some leadership behind me. There was a councilman that I worked closely with, James Sanchez, we call him Jimmy. And I noticed Jimmy was a very hardworking councilman. And I talked to him and I told him in 2 years, I plan to retire. This will be my 6th and last term, and I'd like you to consider running for state representative. We worked together on making sure the city of Hartford didn't go bankrupt, together with Mayor Bronin and other leaders like our speaker, Matt Ritter at the House of Representatives. It was a collective effort. But it was very difficult because we were very, very close, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Now, unfortunately, people in the community don't understand that municipal bankruptcy is very different from personal bankruptcy. When you go bankrupt as an individual, much of your debt is written off. That's not the case with municipalities. What happens is there's these bond covenants that are held by Wall Street, and they want every penny that they're owed, and they don't care if they put a lien on 550 Main Street, our City Hall building. They're gonna, as long as there's a penny to be had, they're first in line. If you want to know how terrible municipal bankruptcy, all you have to do is see what happened in Detroit, Michigan. The city almost became a ghost town. People walked away from their properties. When you see garbage accumulating in front of your house, nobody picks it up. Rats and roaches running all over the place. When you don't get the fire services, the police services, it becomes like anarchy. So people just walked away from their properties, and the city almost became, a ghost town. So we didn't want that. And so I saw that this councilman, James Sanchez, was doing a good job. So I said, listen, in 2 years, I plan not to run again. And I'd like you to run in my position. So I think bringing a bench up and bringing people behind us is very important because, we all get older. I'm a senior citizen myself. And so I was at that point where I thought about what you were saying, Stan, which is, what can we do? Part of my position requires that I teach at the School of Political Science at Central Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And I was asked what kind of course I would like to develop. And I told them I would like to develop a leadership development course to help young people, especially those from disenfranchised communities in our urban areas. And that I believe that after 50 years of experience on all these issues, civil rights issues, human rights issues, labor, as Lou pointed out, politics, public policy, And after all this experience I've had over these decades, that I felt I could offer some experiences, some insights to a new generation of leaders. Because you're right, you're absolutely right, Stan. If we don't develop that cadre of new leaders, our communities are going to suffer.
Before I turn it over to Dr. Bowen, because I've always considered you to be quite a leader, because you've been a union leader, educational leader, leader in civic and government,
Community leader. Stan.
community, and leadership is markedly different than manager or managing.
Management.
Well, like a manager. I use manager purposefully or intentionally as opposed to management, because you can have leaders in management, but not every manager. In fact, I don't consider managers leaders at all. So talk a little bit about the difference between a leader and a manager.
Well, we had that issue rise back in the 1960s with the proliferation of nonprofit organizations, which were created and funded by different government agencies as a way to service the community. So if there was a need during the war on poverty that was originally it was something envisioned by the Kennedy administration, but after his assassination, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, President Lyndon B. Johnson made it his business to try to implement these programs to try to lift people up from poverty. One of the bright spots in the Johnson administration, unfortunately eclipsed by his many mistakes on the Vietnam issue. But here on the domestic side, those programs were created to address particular needs in the community. People who headed those programs are what you might call managers, as you're explaining, Stan. So you're given an opportunity to, whatever the issue is, provide milk, formula for babies. You're given an opportunity to provide winterization programs for people's homes and apartments. That's wonderful. And you manage those programs, you manage those funds. And people assume that if you were the director of one of these agencies, that you automatically represented the best interest of the community. But as you point out, that's not necessarily leadership. And we always saw the contradiction back in the 60s, early 70s, that in a way, sometimes these organizations were self-defeating because they needed the funding, they needed the continued funding, so they became a special interest unto themselves. And the worse the situation got for the community, the better their prospects for funding for their agencies. And they soon realized that if the community was doing well, that the funding would dry up. And once you have a staff, once you have an office, once you have a title, other interests crop up. Whereas people in the community, especially those grassroots leaders that naturally rise from the community, like tenant leaders and others that were coming out of Stowe Village, coming out of Charter Oak Terrace, Rice Heights, and those areas, those grassroots leaders like Bernadine Silvers over at Charter Oak, these people were people that rose up to represent real needs of the community. And they were the people that went to City Hall. They were the ones that advocated for the community. So I see a real distinction between those grassroots leaders that emerged and later others that came in a second wave to service the community as professionals. I don't necessarily consider them all leaders either, because many people came as a second wave, recruited from New York, Chicago, Puerto Rico, and other areas to service the community. But not all of them made the commitment for grassroots leadership. So yes, you're very right. Just the fact that you have a management title does not mean you really represent the aspirations of the community.
Dr. Bowen.
Yes. Mr. Vargas, congratulations on your appointment. I see that you started on February 24th. It must be an exciting time in your journey towards making such, I would say, monumental moves in terms of being appointed as the O'Neill chair. One of the questions that I had in regards to the position, because it is such an esteemed position, which would allow for a lot of possibilities to actually occur, or rather opportunities to occur, and hopefully in the direction of Harvard Public Schools students over the course of the next 120 days. Do you have any benchmarks that you have set, or do you have a top three goal list that you would like to reach within the next 120 days?
Well, this is what I'm trying to do. First of all, since I was not familiar with the campus, was not familiar with the way things work at the university, because most of my teaching was at the public school level. I worked for the Hartford Public Schools for 35 years, but this is my first experience in higher ed. So I've been meeting people, I've been talking to people, and I've been trying to make sure that I don't reinvent the wheel. Where there are things that are working, try to absorb those, use those systems. Where things need improvement, try to improve those. And I don't want to come off with my colleagues now at the university as being an arrogant individual who wants to come in there and try to reinvent the wheel. But I do have specific ideas of what I'd like to do over the next 120 days. Most of my focus is going to be leadership development for our young students. What I'd like to do is connect them with our community organizations. I'd like to get them involved with public policymakers, but not only the students. I'd like to see more of the faculty at the university connected with some of the public policymakers, because we have a lot of expertise there. As I go around the campus, I realize that there are people that have a lot of knowledge, a knowledge base that's incredible, and that unfortunately some of our policymakers haven't accessed that kind of experience. So I see part of my role as being a liaison between policymakers, the faculty, the students, and seeing if we can integrate and get some community engagement on the part of the people on the campus into their communities, and also raise the consciousness of some of our policymakers as to the resources that the students can offer them in helping them realize their mission. So I'm going to be a busy bee the next few months. And,
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm going to, I'm an activist. Lou was talking about, the different titles I've heard as Democratic Town Chairman. I held a title as Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. I've held all these positions, but in reality, I consider myself more of an activist. And I've been a civil rights activist, a human rights activist, been an education activist. And in these different positions that I've held, I've tried to bring my activist mentality to the House with my colleagues, with my fellow legislators, and continue to try to press them on these issues. Because in a sense, it's very easy to enter into these institutions, and just because they have such a long history, they already have ways in which they do things. So sometimes turning them around is like trying to turn an aircraft carrier around. I've read somewhere that for an aircraft carrier that's going north, to try to get it to turn south, you have to make a circle of about 17 miles. It doesn't happen on a dime. But I'm going to try to light as many fires as I can, as quickly as I can, because unfortunately, time is not on my side. Last January, I turned 74. And a lot of people say, well, you look very energetic and enthusiastic. And, as long as my health holds up, I will try to do everything I can. But I also know that we all come with an expiration date. I've had two careers, one as a legislator, and before that, one as an educator. Now I'm coming on board on college campus. This is probably going to be my final act. So I want to work it for all it's worth. I want to be able to see those young people involved in their boards of education, their city councils. I want to see those faculty members act as advisors to policymakers. There's a lot on my plate, Dr. Bowen. A lot on my plate.
I know that. I know that to be the case. I work in higher ed. And so, yes, that is the case. I'm such a strong proponent of, the Harvard Public School system in terms of the students, in terms of what they are exposed to. And so with CCSU actually being pretty close to Harvard in proximity, I would love for there to be some sort of partnership that could be formed through the Office of Superintendent Leslie Rodriguez. Yes, so that it is that our Hartford Public Schools students can see how it is that not only your position, but how the college environment is, especially when it comes to leadership. I've seen that, although there are opportunities out there, it seems as though, as Stan puts it, the bench is light. We have the bench being stacked in, respective sports venues, but in terms of politics, that's lacking. And to me, that's unacceptable. And so when it is that one is in a position to expose as many young people as possible to leadership as well as politics, from the perspective that they can then become individuals that will become qualified to pass the baton to in terms of succession planning. I think that that should be at the top of the priority list. However, that's just me as an observer stepping back. Understandably so, you have a lot on your plate in higher education. It never seems to dwindle down to being just a little bit. So every day is an adventure. However, hopefully there will be a partnership formed with Hartford Public School System so that our students are steered into that pathway, even from the perspective of early college, where pathways can be geared towards leadership per your chair assignment.
Dr. Bowen, there's so many things that go through my mind as we speak. And the ideas are going to keep popping up. People are constantly giving me ideas. I've got to say, though, that Connecticut is a very interesting state, because here in Connecticut, most people want to do what is correct. And unfortunately, there are a lot of barriers out there on housing issues, on other issues that have prevented, I think, us from moving forward. But that's breaking. Those barriers are starting to break down. And I've got to say that one of the exciting things that I've noticed lately is that many of the policymakers and key political figures in the state of Connecticut have actually expressed their willingness to me to share some of their experiences with the students at Central. And so including Governor Lamont, who came up to me and said, when you get this thing going, I want to be there to share some of my insights with the students, the Speaker of the House, Matt Ritter, and others, and I'm sure Stan McCauley and you, Dr. Bowen, I'm sure that there is a disposition and an excitement to share that knowledge. And people have told me, don't forget me. I've worked on this, I've worked on that. I'd like to share that with the students. And that is very exciting that people have that generous spirit here in Connecticut.
Absolutely. From my perspective, based on Connecticut's obstacles from my perspective are just opportunities for successful strategies to be deployed.
That's right. And none of us have a monopoly on really what the solutions are. I often tell people, I'm a good problem solver. One of the reasons I think that I've been able to exercise some leadership in this community is because I've always had this ability since I was a little kid, that when I was confronted with a complex problem, that I somehow was able to see through the complexities and try to arrive at a viable solution. And people noticed that in me, so they encouraged it, and I became quite a good problem solver. That's how I wound up being president of the Hartford Federation of Teachers, chief negotiator for 5 different unions at the Board of Education, negotiating up against law firms like Shipman and Goodwin, who represented management. And they would ask me, where did you go to law school? And I said, I never went to law school. I'm a teacher. But I've learned, because you have to learn. And life throws a lot of curveballs at you. So problem solving is one of my skills. And I've noticed that because I was naive and young, I thought every problem was solvable. I took on some pretty big tasks. For example, when I got to Hartford, I realized that we had no Latino leadership. We had a large Puerto Rican community, but no Latino leadership in the political realm. So we created an organization called the Puerto Rican Political Action Committee to address that issue. And we were able to elect people. But that's not always the answer, because sometimes people think that because we elect somebody who looks like us, that means that our problems are solved. and far from it. Electoral politics is limited, and we have to have, as you know, because you've been in higher ed, there's politics in higher ed, in the internal workings of higher ed. There's politics in the healthcare industry and housing, in every aspect. And some of this politics has nothing to do with the elected officials. It's internal politics of these institutions. And I tell people, one of my definitions of politics is interpersonal and intergroup relations. That's what politics really is. It's a way to handle interpersonal and intergroup relations. And it's an art.
It actually, you know what, you're touching on some topics near and dear to my heart, because in terms of politics, it's in every aspect of where it is that we find industry and governmental agency. And so this is where that investment in Hartford Public Schools students allows for them to hopefully get connected with individuals in our representation, body within the legislative, in order to get mentorships, internships, opportunities to write bills, to listen on to testimonies, and so on and so forth. Because again, it's about the investment. A lot of what I've seen that's happened within Hartford has been shaped around there being less of an investment in creating individuals that go 13 years in a public school system to become part of the leadership, which I would deem to be the aristocracy of the state. But again, when it is that they're either groomed as leaders or even as educated constituents or constituency, the question for me becomes, where is it that through the Hartford Public School system that there is a consistent emphasis on making sure that educational grounding and civics, so that they can become the constituents that are understanding how the process goes, so that they become more politically inclined in terms of attending meetings, going out to vote, things like that. And that's lacking in Hartford. And so with the investment being placed in our generation that is coming up, hopefully we can actually begin to see the dynamics of today's constituency change to a more activist type of constituent, so that more things can be done that benefits Hartford, because we invested in the youth of Hartford. Because we got to pass the baton to someone. Like you said, we all have an expiration date. And if we die with the baton in our hand, that means that the graveyard becomes the most wealthiest place on the planet. Because if we don't share what we currently have, then it is no longer going to be something that can be transferred for upcoming generations, and they have to start from scratch. And we know as youngins we make mistakes, but with all the life knowledge that we have, we should be more than willing to actually share, because we care.
Absolutely, that's where the education component comes in. And that's, of course, I tell people that being an educator is not really a job. Being an educator is a vocation. And I believe from an early age, you have an aptitude toward this vocation. People that see a teaching job as simply a job will not last long. I experienced this as a teacher in Hartford, as a union leader in Hartford, that people that came into it simply for the salary and the benefits and had no real interest in educating our kids, they had a hard time and lasted very little in the system. They got burned out quickly. You have to have a love for teaching, which is one of my second skills. Besides being a problem solver, I also discovered I had an ability to take those complex issues that people sometimes fail to understand and break it down in simple language so that people understood what the issues were. And people would tell me, they'd say, Ed, this is something that for years I wondered about, and I really never was able to figure it out. And in a few sentences, it's like you've opened up a window and the sunlight came in. I understand the issue completely now. And I realized that I was able to simplify in a way And I maybe partly because of my involvement in politics, you get used to creating the elevator speech and trying to find ways to simplify complex issues. And there's a danger in that too. But at least open up people's eyes to what the issues you mentioned, like civics. I taught civics, geography, American history at the high school at Hartford Public High School, the second oldest high school in the United States. And people would look at me and they would say, Mr. Vargas, how does the U.S. government differ from the state of Connecticut government? How does the state of Connecticut differ from the municipal government of Hartford? People need to understand these things. They need to understand also how the powers of government are divided into a judiciary that's controlled by the judges, into an executive that runs the government, manages, as Stan was saying, those are the managers. But then you have the policymakers with the legislators, the lawmakers, which was the branch of government in which I worked in for so many years. So these are the kinds of issues that people need to understand. When I was talking to residents in the South End of Hartford, many of them would say to me, listen, when you go to Washington, you should do this, that. And I said, listen, a state representative does not go to Washington. That would be John Larson, our U.S. representative. Or people would talk to me about municipal issues. And that's where I would talk to them about the city council, their city council person, and their mayor. Because people just do not understand.
You're speaking to my point. Absolutely. You're speaking to my point, because where there's that gap in that understanding, right?
Right.
They don't know how to really engage. And so that's where bridging that gap over the course of the 13 years that students spend within our Hartford public school system, this can become something that, again, builds up a more knowledgeable constituency when it comes to local and beyond, in terms of our politics, in terms of the divisions, in terms of federal, all of that, right? And so, we need that type of constituency, groundbreaking foundational education infused or injected into the mindset of our young people, in order for them to see how it is that things work, and then to even consider making that a career pathway.
Well, Dr. Bowen, as you know, those subjects, civics, geography, American history, these are the kinds of courses that got short shrift with the race toward making sure that kids did well on the standardized tests. Everybody started to focus in on the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they started these programs and these courses that were so important to enriching the life of students, got not only what we call them the social sciences or social studies. Those kinds of courses got short shrift. They became less and less important in the curriculum of the boards of education around the state. And emphasis was given on those things that were going to be tested in the standardized tests. And it's really unfortunate, because people started teaching to the test to try to make sure that the scores would go up, and teachers were put under a lot of pressure. And during my tenure as a teacher leader, I noticed that in reality, this was really impoverishing the education rather than expanding the education. As a matter of fact, when I first started as a young educator, if I had taught to the test, I probably would have been fired. It would have been considered cheating to teach the students the answers to the test. That would have been considered a shortcut.
I've got to ask this question.
Oh, hold that thought.
Okay.
We'll take a short break, and we'll come when teachers get together, like lawyers.
Absolutely.
Stick and stay, my friends. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. It's Morning Talk.
Every bad political decision is made by a politician elected to office. So if you think your vote doesn't matter, just remember this. There are people sitting with politicians in a back room making deals about your future, making policies about your children, making decisions about your neighborhood. To them, you are just a vote. You are not their charity. You are not their cause. You are just a vote. Elections have consequences, and if you don't vote, you are actually voting to keep these people in power to work against you. Now, more than ever, you need to make your vote count. Declare your independence from the plantation of party politics and free your political mind. Independent thinkers are Puerto Rican, Mexican, Peruvian, Indian, Bosnian, Italian, Irish, Jamaican, African American, European, straight, gay, Nigerian, transgender, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, short, tall, skinny, rich, poor, happy, sad. Some of us hold a PhD and others a GED. And though we may be Democrats, Republicans, or members of the Working Families Party, we all have escaped the plantation of party politics and become independent thinkers because we as individuals are more than a party. You see, independent thinkers come from all walks of life. And the one thing we all have in common is that we love, live, laugh, and learn in the city of Hartford. We are the constituents, and the government of Hartford belongs to us. My name is J. Stan McCauley. I'm an independent thinker, and I approve this message because it's time to stop towing the party line and vote for a candidate you can trust. You too can escape the plantation of party politics if you have the courage to free your political mind.
My name's J. Stan McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J. Stan McCauley, along with the champions of talk, Dr. Bowen, Cacique in the house, special guest, Edwin Vargas. So, everybody, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Edwin, We're just gonna switch gears real quick, but Dr. Maya, ask your question, but we wanna,
Yes. Just in scope of where we left off last, I was thinking about the standardized testing that was laid out. In your opinion, Mr. Vargas, out of all of the constituents that play a role in education, who does standardized testing actually benefit?
That's a good question, because I often, there was a whole scandal about whether people were taking shortcuts and cheating and all this. And the urban areas like Hartford, Bridgeport, Waterbury are under a microscope constantly. And but I really felt that the standardized testing really was benefiting the affluent communities, because it's tied in, and this is an unfortunate, it has to do with the housing patterns, but cities like Avon, communities like Avon, which have high levels of scores in their standardized testings, increases the property values of that community. So there's actually more of an incentive, and I try to explain this to people, there's more of an incentive for educators in those communities like Greenwich, Avon, Farmington, and others to make sure that those scores stay high. So if there's any shortcuts taken, or what we might call cheating or corruption in exam, I would look closer at those affluent communities, because there's an enormous amount of pressure on those educators to make sure that they don't drop in the ratings. Because if one of those communities drops in the ratings, the property values would go down. So the mayors, the first selectmen in those towns, the superintendents of those towns put an inordinate amount of pressure on those educators. Now, I know people have this misconception that somehow educators in the inner cities are somehow lesser than the educators in these affluent suburbs where the scores are high. But nothing could be further from the truth. As a leader of Hartford teachers, I used to get calls from educators from those communities begging me to send them Hartford teachers to help them. They used to tell me things like, I can't believe that that your teachers have classrooms with 30% or 40% of their students being special needs students, or language learners, English language learners, or other issues. And we have one or two of those kids, and we can't, it's destroying our whole school system. We can't deal with those kids, and we need help. So they were drowning with just one or two kids that were special need kids, or a few kids that were English language learners. And that was our daily bread in the Hartford public school system. So our teachers were, received the baptism of fire from the moment they entered the Hartford public school system, because they had to deal with all those ramifications of poverty, which those communities outside of Hartford didn't. So it always irked me when I got up at a community meeting. I would listen to people speak, and they would come up with the idea, well, our problem is that our teachers aren't as good as the teachers in Farmington or Avon or Simsbury, one of these affluent communities. I would get up and say, you're mistaken. The teachers in those communities actually look to the inner city teachers as heroes.
That's a great answer, Ed. Thank you so much for that, brother. I would venture to say that the real beneficiary of the tests are the people who make the tests, because they get paid. It doesn't matter
That's
if
true.
Our kids do good or bad, they're still getting paid. But we're going to switch gears real quick, man. Because as you stated earlier, you're also a former politician. So can you give us your take on the current political climate in Hartford in terms of Mayor Bronin leaving and the cadre of candidates that we have now?
Yes, it's very unfortunate, but candidates, no matter how great their message is, no matter how great their experience is, no matter how great their vision is, if they can't translate that to the voters, if they can't get their message out to the voters, it doesn't matter. I often tell people, you could have the greatest performer, you could have the greatest speaker show up at Central Park in New York City, and if nobody knew about it, there wouldn't be any audience. So unless people are informed, it really doesn't matter how great the candidates are. And in Hartford, unfortunately, the the ability to get your message out right now has a price tag of at least $500,000. Going back to the campaign of Eddie Perez, who became the first Latino mayor in the city of Hartford many years ago, he spent over $500,000 at that time. Since then, about 7 years ago, when Luke Bronin ran, many people estimate that he spent close to $1 million in his campaign. So, although officially maybe it might have been 700, 750, but there were other values that were added that probably added up to over $1 million. So now, 7 years later, if a candidate runs for mayor, you look at the candidate, what candidate can generate that kind of wealth? It has changed in state politics because at the state level, we created a citizens election fund, which if you're able to get small contributions, $5, $10 from the community, and you're able to build up a little over $5,000 in small contributions, you get a grant. So you get a grant of about $32,000 plus the $5,000 you raise. So that's $37,000 to run for state representative. You get more if you're running for state senator. The reason that program was created at the state level was to keep big money out of politics so people would be able to run, but they didn't want to give the money just to anybody. They wanted to make sure that person had some grassroots support and was able to raise small contributions adding up to $5,000. I think it's a great program because candidates don't have to go begging large corporations or wealthy individuals for campaign contributions. Unfortunately, this program doesn't exist in municipal politics. In municipal politics, every dollar that you're going to use in a political campaign, you have to raise the hard way, asking individuals to donate, which is like the old system for the state politics, which means you have to go begging and borrowing. Very few people have the ability to raise over $500,000 to be able to get their message out, to be able to buy their lawn signs, to be able to buy media time, to be able to create literature, send out mailings, create phone banks. That costs money. And most people in poor communities like Hartford are not going to volunteer for free. You're going to need to pay some of the people to go out canvassing for you. And it's not that they don't want to help the candidate. It's that they can't afford to help the candidate if they're not compensated, if they don't have a little money for their gasoline, if they have to go away from the odd jobs that they do to work on your campaign. They need to survive and their families need to survive. I always paid volunteers in my campaign $15 an hour, which was not much. It's the minimum wage, but at least it was something. In some of these other communities, more affluent communities, you still have the old volunteer system where people have good jobs, good paying jobs, and they can afford to give a couple of hours to a campaign without charge. That's very difficult in the city of Hartford where the needs are so great. So that's part of the problem. When you ask me, who's a viable candidate for the office of mayor in the city of Hartford, there's very few people that have the ability to raise that kind of money. I thought about it for a long time. I know that Thea Montañez, who was the COO under Luke Bronin, probably could have raised that money if somehow Mayor Bronin helped her with his Greenwich connection. She probably could have raised the money to get a message out, but she wasn't interested, from what I heard, in running for mayor. You have individual like Councilman Nick LeBron. Nick LeBron, city councilman in the city of Hartford, is interested in running for mayor. But I look at his campaign and I really don't see the viability of him raising sufficient funds to be a viable candidate. I look at the campaign of Eric Coleman, and I realize that he has the support of the middle class in Windsor and Bloomfield, so maybe he'll be able to raise $200,000 or $300,000. I doubt he's going to raise $500,000. I really do, despite the fact that he was a judge, despite the fact that he's a former senator. I think maybe John Fonfara can raise the money because he's the chair of the finance committee at the state capitol, so all the lobbyists need him. So they probably will help him raise some money. So maybe he might be able to hit that $500,000 threshold. And I'm talking $500,000 today which doesn't buy you what it bought Eddie Perez, 15 or 18 or whatever years ago because of inflation. So it may be more. Probably if a candidate could probably do it with $300,000 or $400,000 if they have a good ground operation, a lot of support and name recognition, but that would be cutting it very close. So Lou, it's a complex issue because we really haven't squeezed money out of politics at the local level.
It's interesting that you say that because you never talked about who was qualified to be the mayor. You only talked about who could raise the money. That's completely absurd to me, Ed. That we have to and that we have to look at politics in that way. There's no community interest in your words.
Well, what I said at the beginning was that the candidate's message, as important as it is, I think maybe you didn't hear that part, that no matter what the vision is, no matter how great the candidate is, they need to get that message to the voters. So you can be the greatest candidate and you can have the greatest ideas to help uplift the community. But if nobody knows about it, you're not going to get elected. That's my message.
Ed, now, did you consider running for mayor at all?
No, not really, because yes, I did in the past, and I did run for mayor in 2011. At the time, though, the Governor Malloy, stepped in. I don't know if you recall this or not. I
recall. He came from a special session.
That's right. He came in. Governor Malloy came into the Hartford politics, and he cut some kind of a deal where Sean Wooden would become president of the city council, and they convinced the mayor at the time, Pedro Segarra, to run for another term. So I wasn't successful in that campaign. Originally, that was not the case. There was a vacuum. And so I did have some support from the Spanish American Merchants Association and some of the small business people. And I believe I would have been able to raise sufficient funds to get a message out there. However, at that time, when Governor Malloy came in and convinced Pedro to run for a second term, he was the incumbent. And the only challenger at that time that he had was myself and Sean Wooden, but he convinced Sean to drop out of the race and run for the council. I wasn't successful in raising the money. That's why I tell you the money is, we can talk about that the money is not important, but I will tell you from my experience that it has gotten to the point now where the people that print your material won't even touch it unless they see the money up front. They have been burned so many times by producing materials for candidates. The same thing with the radio stations, the local community newspapers. They've been burned so many times that they don't trust anybody running for public office. They want to see their money up front. And volunteers in your campaign, they need gas money to get around. Everybody, the printers, the media, everyone expects some kind of compensation. So yes, you can run a campaign, but if you're talking to yourself, you're not a viable candidate.
Ed, so there's a large segment of the community that thinks that you would be an ideal mayor for the city. What do you say to those people when they hear that you're not running? They think you would make a perfect candidate right now.
Well, I appreciate the support of people, and that people have asked me if I'm interested. There was a time I was interested in the state senatorial seat and held by John Fonfara, and I had expressed to John and to the town committee that if John stepped aside, I might be interested in running for the state senate. I had also expressed an interest in the mayorship, but as I said to Dr. Bowen earlier, I'm at a point now where I'm 74 years old, and I believe it's time that we start getting some young blood into politics because, I have a lot of experience, but I'd like to share some of that experience with a new generation of people because, frankly, in a way, it's a form of arrogance to think that we are the only people that can lead the community. There's a lot of talent out there. We have to develop that talent. And I believe that we have to leave these decisions to the people that are going to be most affected by these decisions, which are our young people, our kids, our grandkids. They're the ones that are going to have to live with the decisions that are made in the public policy arena. So I'm at a point now where I'm making a transition from active politics to the educational system. That doesn't mean that politics is out of my life, because as you know, politics is imbued in everything we do. So I will continue to try to mentor people. I will try to continue to inspire people to get involved. But I think that, after 50 years of community activism, political activism, union activism, I believe that it's time for new leadership to step up. We need that young blood.
Outstanding, Ed. Thank you so much for that answer. And so you talked about Jimmy Sanchez, who, by the way, was victorious last night in the 6th district. What other young people have you mentored or you think are coming up through the ranks and have shown, a knack to lead?
Well, I've been working with about 10 or 15 young people that, they come and go because there's many things impacting their lives, as you can imagine. Here's one of the challenges that I face, and that is that some of the young people, their families, as soon as they can do a little better, and as one of my friends used to say, as soon as they can rub 2 nickels together, they start looking to move to East Hartford, to Manchester, to other communities where they perceive the school systems to be better, the quality of life to be better. So, it's been kind of hard to keep them in the city of Hartford. And I can understand the desire. And this has happened in the Black community too. Stan knows about this, and I'm sure that Dr. Bowen knows too, that much of the Black middle class and professional class went to Windsor, went to Bloomfield, went to West Hartford. Many of, we used to have a large Italian community with first generation immigrants, second generation, third generation. Most of them, as they were doing better, moved to Wethersfield, Rocky Hill, Newington. I run into them all the time when I was out there talking to people. They would say, "Oh, I grew up on Franklin Avenue. I grew up on Wethersfield Avenue," but they perceived that it was better for their families to move out. So you look at, for example, North Hartford, where we have a huge Black community, a huge Puerto Rican community, but it's very hard to find leadership there. I mean, I like Eric Coleman. He's a good friend of mine, but frankly, he's a Bloomfield guy. And much of the leadership in terms of business in North Hartford, much of the leadership in the NAACP and all these organizations is frankly suburbanite leadership. Even the reverends that come into these churches in North Hartford, South Hartford, the West End. Well, the West End, they do still have a strong, viable middle class. There are pockets like Blue Hills neighborhood still has a viable middle class. The South End has some pockets of viable, but for the most part, that's our challenge. Our challenge is you really don't want to force kids to stay in the city of Hartford, but I try to encourage them to give back to the community. My wife and I could have left. She was a fellow teacher, taught 35 years in the Hartford school system, and we brought our kids up going to Parkville School. When we moved to the South End, they went to Naylor, they went to Buckley High School. We tried to keep them in the system, and sometimes we would ask ourselves, are we doing right by our kids by staying in the city of Hartford with all its challenges? But, that was a decision we made, that we wanted to reinvest in this community. But not everyone has the time or patience or is willing to risk these challenges for their kids. And I can understand that, Lou.
Ed, thank you so much for that answer. That's incredible. We've often talked in the past about the need to mentor people. And I do believe in term limits for all these political positions. I don't think any politician should be in office for more than 10 years. These state reps and state senators, it becomes almost like, they have a sense of ownership and they don't want to share. So I believe in that. And mentoring our young people is a way that we build strong communities, because you get them invested in their community early in the game. So I definitely agree with all of that. Thank you so much, man. It's been really good having you, man. I don't know if Dr. Maya or Stan have some questions for you.
Mr. Vargas, listen, it's been a pleasure. I have seen you at Hartford Board of Education meetings before, and to my regret, I did not have an opportunity to actually introduce myself personally, but with all that you've done across your journey in education and politics, those results that you've received, we greatly appreciate you.
I thank you very much. And, Lou knows this, that when I was a young guy, I was a radical, and I had no patience for the community leadership. And at that time, we had people like Maria Sanchez and others, whom a school was named after behind El Mercado on Park Street. And I used to criticize them because they were part of the political machine. And they used to be angry at me, too, for being a radical and for being a rabble-rouser. But I told them, listen, you guys are sellouts. You're part of the machine. As I get older, I realized that they were able to open a lot of doors for a lot of people. They were able to do things by influencing the policymakers in their own way. So that we needed both the strategy of putting pressure from the grassroots and the outside, but we also needed people on the inside who could help broker those needs among the policymakers. So I developed this strategy of being both on the outside and on the inside. And
sounds like a good chess game.
Oh yeah, and it worked for a while. But like I said, sometimes we become victims of our own success, because once people elect someone like, we elected Eddie Perez mayor, people thought, okay, the battle's over. No, the battle's just beginning.
Just beginning.
Dr. Toro at Central Connecticut State University, I believe, has a vision. But she's got to deal with the internal pressures and the external pressures that educational institutions face. So things are never that easy. Dr. Zulma Toro is Puerto Rican, and she has a strong understanding and a feeling, and she'd like to use the university as a resource to have these good things happen for our communities. But as you can imagine, Dr. Bowen, having worked in higher ed yourself, nothing comes easy.
No, but it makes life truly an adventure. So there's never a dull moment.
All right, my friend, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us this morning, and look forward to having you back on many occasions to share your wisdom and knowledge with us, and look forward to talking to you soon. And
give my regards to your lovely wife, Stan.
I will do that. Thank you very much. God bless you now.
God bless.
Peace.
Bye.
At peace, man. Living legend and esteemed elder, Edwin Vargas, man. What a pleasure. What an incredible conversation. I was very pleased with that, man. Thank you so much, Dr. Maya, for your wonderful input, man. Yes. When two educated, it was like awesome. A clash of titans in here today, Stan. Loved it, man. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Loved it, man.
Are we off the air?
We're still on the air, but we
still going strong.
And we're still on the air.
Yeah.
So people understand. I tell people this all the time. They come up to me. I pride myself in being a good problem solver and being able to translate in simple terms what complicated issues are to people. But lately, when people bring me a real complex problem, I say to them, I wish you had brought me this problem, when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I had the solution to every problem under the sun. I was a young radical, and I had every solution. As I get older, I realize that there are no simple solutions, that everything is complex. Problems require very complex solutions. Sometimes someone said, and I have to agree with this, that for every complex problem, there's a simple solution, but unfortunately, it's the wrong solution.
I like that. All right, let's take our break. We will be right back, my friends. Stick and stay. It is indeed more than talk.
Beautiful, man.
Tourist Day, Mr. Vargas.
So my name is Nelky Maldonado.
My name is Ramon L. Arroyo.
And we know that Hartford Parent University provides good services and resources to parents in our communities, which are greatly needed because a lot of times our parents, they don't know where to go, how to get information, and being part of this program is essential to them in being successful in their children's education.
And I think that parents should get involved in their kids' education because it's very important. Education is, I always believe, is a success in life. If you got a good education, you can be very successful.
So we encourage our parents to please come join the program, ask lots of questions, and I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed.
How do you define evil? Is it the pedophile school administrator or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they are fighting for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for constituents to flip the script and leave the plantation of party politics and free your political mind.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Talk.
Oh yeah. All right, we're back. We got Jay Hogarth in the background,
Yes.
bringing us in.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, when I look at those guys playing, Stan, ain't nobody jamming harder than that bass and that piano player, man. Them dudes are
Listen.
like completely enjoying the groove, bro. It's awesome
Oh, yeah.
to watch them.
That's the vibe right now.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Hey man, it was so good to have Ed on, an esteemed elder, a man who's done so much for our city. and he's so proud of our city. You know, people like Ed and Ella Cromwell, you know, people like that, they had profound love for our city. Stan McCauley, Dr. Maya Bowen, these people, man, they don't bleed red or blue. They bleed Hartford, man. They love their city, and I'm right there with them. It's true, man.
You cut me, I bleed Hartford.
I love my city, man, and I've often said this on the program. Yeah, anybody doesn't want the best for our city needs to pack their bags up today and get the heck out of town. Our city is a wonderful place, and we're going to continue to build it up. There's a new mindset. There's a vision that's becoming clearer every day. We're going to take over our city, and I just want our community, our family, like I like to call us, know that the best candidate for the mayor of the city of Hartford, and I'm saying it right here first, is none other than the Honorable Stan McCauley. He's got my vote for mayor. Stan McCauley for mayor. I'm saying it right here. Right here, I'm saying it. He's the most qualified candidate. He loves his community. You notice, let me say this, community. Let me say this, family. John Fonfera got up in the last majoral forum and told the community, because here's the thing you gotta love about professional politicians. They tell you the truth right to your face. This man got up in front of the audience and said, I have been involved in politics, him and Eric, for 36 years. And I've watched my district and other districts go down. And I'm saying, brother, why are you running? What have you done? And I mean this sincerely, family. I'm not being facetious. I'm not attacking anybody. But you're telling us in 36 years, you've watched your district and
that's not a stat you should be touting. You watched it go down. You've been there 36 years and you didn't see it.
And now he wants to run for mayor. And I'm saying, so my question, Dr. Maya, is what exactly are you bringing to the table?
36 years.
Right. If you haven't been able to fix your own district, how you going to fix our city? How you going to bring something?
I don't see it.
So guys like that, and I say this respectfully, I like John Fonfera as a person and Eric Coleman as people, right? John is another racist, privileged man, but, you know, we tolerate him, right? But they don't need to be running. We need young people. Yeah, 36 years, you haven't done much. Let some young people. And in terms of management and leadership, I want the audience to listen to this very closely. Any manager, no matter how good or bad he is, the best that they can do is follow directions. So the better that you can follow directions, the better of a manager that you are. Now,
I'm going to add something to that.
A leader is somebody who creates and develops and implements. It's completely different because you're not following any directions. You're creating directions.
So management holds down the status quo. Right. So when it is that you want to see changes actually occur, leadership has that vision that they're actually able to impart upon those that they are overseeing or
who are good direction followers.
However you want to put that, right? So a manager is going to make sure the status quo stays the way that it is. They're not looking for changes. They want to make sure that the day-to-day gets done to the specs that have been laid out from a historical perspective.
You have to follow directions.
Your leadership is going to be the visionary, thinking forward. What is our short-term plan? What is our long-term plan? And let's make moves to make sure that we can accomplish that over time, which then inserts that vision, hopefully, to an open-minded manager to take that and begin to develop it into the day-to-day plans through the management aspect, right?
That's
so
beautifully stated, Dr. Maya.
We've got a lot going on.
So I would say, I'm so glad you stated all of that because it kind of segues right into the message for today is for any educator or anybody who works in some type of government agency that deals with people, right? And I'm talking to black and brown people now specifically, but also to good white folk that have been good allies, right? Your job is to make sure that where you work at, all the policies and all the rules and regulations that are in place, that you make the people that are enforcing that very uncomfortable every day about those policies, and you have to fight for change. So your job is not just to teach, but your job is also to be out there advocating about change. Because remember what I said to you before, family, if you are in education or in politics, all you're doing is promoting, supporting racism and white privilege. I know it's hard to fathom that, but we have to change, and we have to stop accepting things that are not good for us. Peace, family.
Yes, yes. So this is a nice transition, because you can't accomplish what you need to accomplish unless you have a heart that is courageous to go down that pathway, right? So
Absolutely.
when individuals seek to make some changes, they have to understand that there's sacrifice. And most times they do know that there's a sacrifice that is involved in that pathway towards seeking change, because, you could be up for retaliation, loss of job, which is, the basis of how it is that you hold down your own individual household. Now, with us transitioning just a little bit, we did have a Hartford Public Schools town hall on last evening that I would like to dive into just briefly.
Dive
right?
away.
So interestingly enough, I did, a little bit of research, as I am known to do. And so a town hall is described as being a way for an organization to meet and connect with their constituents. Now, having said that, upon holding this town hall, certain things should have actually occurred that actually didn't. However, it was what it was for the hour that it was held, from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. on last evening. And I would ask that everybody go ahead and look at that, because it was specifically to speak upon the budget for Hartford Public School Systems for the 2023-2024 school year, which it is noted that a $24 million deficit is looming. And so they laid out their perspective on how it is that they're seeking to mitigate said deficit. Now, according to my research, there should have been an opening address, state of the actual organization presentation, an address that results regarding a poll sent before the meeting, some features, initiative, and focus, a Q&A session, some ending points, a survey, and some minutes to be shared, and a post-mortem. So overall, there was an opening address, state of the organization's presentation. In terms of the poll, I didn't hear anything related to any results related to the poll of how many individuals actually sent in responses to asking questions. Features, initiatives to the focus that was touched upon. There was about 20 minutes of Q&A. They did touch on some ending points. No survey was presented afterwards, and hopefully some minutes related to this town hall will be provided. Now, I would say that by me observing the virtual town hall, it was interesting, because it seemed to be kind of sort of like as if there was like a regular meeting that is typically held between the superintendent and the CFO when it is that they're presenting to their board members virtually. I will say, to my own input, I did complete the survey and submit questions, and several of my questions were asked. But really and truly, it leaves me with even more questions in terms of where we currently stand in terms of addressing certain things specifically related to the budget being placed out in front of the public as being $24 million deficit, right? So again, for those that want to get into the details and take their own notes and formulate their own questions, I would say to please do that and address them to the superintendent of Hartford Public Schools as well as the chief financial officer. It's again, after watching it left me with more questions. Has the budget now been resolved? And then even going forward, with one of the questions that I did pose in terms of how it is that the financials are represented, accordingly, I asked in my survey going forward, will measures be put into place to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the school budget to ensure accountability for spending decisions? And then an additional question that I had was whether or not they would be constructing the budget so that it is user-friendly for the public, board members, and other constituents who do not have financial reporting expertise. And so, there's things that still present themselves as questionables, even with this town hall that was only slotted for an hour. I don't believe that's enough time to actually allow for the unpacking of all that it is that presents itself as the complexities of this matter. And so hopefully when it is that our board members are convening on deciding how they will vote for the budget, this deficit is not something that is in consideration through the mitigating factors that the superintendent and CFO actually presented.
It would seem to me that a lot of the things that you mentioned in terms of the board members and their decisions, those things will probably be done in committee, because the board meetings that they have on Tuesdays, the third Tuesday, is not really a board meeting. It's
right.
The board meeting in public really to vote on the decisions, but the committee meetings have already been had. So folks are going to have to attend those committee meetings to really get, some of the drill down to some of those answers. I guess I'm not the most informed guy in town anymore, because I had no idea about this.
It was in the paper.
Town hall.
It's been in the paper a couple times about the deficit.
Well, the deficit I knew
yeah,
about.
and they always talk about putting it on the back of all the support staff, which a lot of times
I don't understand how you
play
have
a
deficit.
vital role. One of the issues that I've had with the Board of Ed was that they rented the G. Fox building. The city of Hartford has plenty of buildings that they own that they would not have to pay a rent for. Then they rented the old, the Hawthorne on Sigourney Street. Yeah, they rented that for a while. They were paying $500,000 a year. And they have schools that they weren't using. So I think that when we do an audit, we have to audit stuff like that and ask those tough questions, Dr. Maya. Why are we paying several $1 million in rent when we own buildings that we can be in for rent free?
I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It's like
not just that,
wallet,
but going after the support staff all the time is crazy, because they provide a real service. Support staff is just as critical to it, especially to black and brown children. Support staff are just as critical, and sometimes more so than the actual teachers. And we have to reconcile with that.
The perspective that I have is that if it was money coming out of their own pockets, they would have decided differently on how to spend that money. That's just my perspective.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. Yes, they would be much more judicious.
When it is that, when you are a representative or fiduciary of such a large amount of money, those considerations should be at the forefront in terms of cost efficiency and cost effectiveness. And we've got way too many buildings, again, as you stated, that could have been utilized so that rent expense would not have been something that would have impacted other areas that could have benefited Hartford students.
Well,
so millions over the years, Dr. Maya. Millions and millions. In rent.
So then, to me,
unconscionable. I'm just saying.
Right. So the question is, I think the question is one of I guess oversight, because my mind is thinking So I hope I can articulate what it is articulate what I'm saying.
Take your time.
The I guess the default thought is that we have good people in place to do the job. Now, reasonable minds can agree or disagree on whether or not a location should be wherever it is. So I guess my question would be, why did you decide to move where you are, and how did you get to that conclusion? Because I think that for us saying that what they should have done is cool, but the fact is they did it. And we don't want to have that kind of a conversation 5 years, 10 years, or next year. What we need to do is ask these critical questions along the way. So that means either people that are on the board aren't asking the right questions, and it's no good. There are two board members that I think are champions. Rock stars.
What two of those?
That would be Tyrone Walker and Shawntae Brody.
Okay.
I agree.
To me, they're rock stars.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the others aren't, good people, nice people, reasonable people, friendly people. They're not rock stars in my book.
Well, they don't seem to be any of those things.
Well, I mean, to me, I'm just saying. So, but those two aren't enough to move the needle.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You need
two votes.
You need 5 to move the needle, because there's
the problem with that type of thinking, Stan, is that you can have a great person, but if that great person or great people, a great team, you can have the votes on the Board of Ed that you need. But if those people, once again, brother, if those people are supporting and enforcing racist ideals, then what good are they? So the problem is that, like Ed said earlier, the problem is not quite that simple.
No,
because we do have good people in place, but they're enforcing things that hurt us.
Right, but I'm saying I think that the rock stars are pushing back, but they only have 2 votes out of the whole. So those that are there, particularly now, this I might get a little bit of pushback, or folk get all upset and bent out of shape, but there are 5 members of that panel appointed by the mayor.
Yeah.
The other 4 are elected by the constituents. All right. So that doesn't mean that the mayoral appointees by default are going to carry the water, because we have some that were elected carrying the water.
They're carrying our shame.
Or carrying the shame, as you say. But once again, this is why elections have consequences, and it matters who you vote for, because appointed people are appointed by elected people. People elected to office are accountable to you only if you hold them accountable.
And
so
birds of a feather flock together.
They absolutely do. So you all have to start coming to Board of Education meetings. And I would also say this. And this is a legitimate power thing in every institution and entity where there is a body that sets policy and an individual who interprets and implements it. So between the board and the leader, there's always a tension for power. And I would submit that the superintendent is running the board and not the board running the superintendent.
I would second that.
Well,
that. Let me just state this, Kasike.
Yes.
Based on what it is that I've seen in action, what we are finding is that once it is that a presentation is given by the superintendent or the chief financial officer, and where a vote needs to be made, more often than not, the majority rubber stamp or cosign on it, right? And so for me as an observer, I'm wondering why it is that is, but outside of the fact that it's almost like a power dynamic and possibly a disconnect in which some of the members may not know that they are the oversight in regards to what it is that's being presented by the superintendent and or the CFO. Now, having said that, when it is that our rock stars are presenting questions, right? What I'm finding is that the majority of the time, and somebody can contact me if I'm wrong, the answers that they are seeking are not all the way presented or at all or within a timely fashion, so that the entire body of the membership of the board can then make more informed decisions regarding how they vote. So there's a dynamic there, in terms of timeliness, in terms of answers posed and being actually answered by the superintendent and or the CFO from, just really and truly going down the road when it is that a vote has to be made. If those questions asked have not been answered, then how is it that anybody can actually render a truly informed decision regarding how it is that they vote? Because they can only base it on what it is that they've been presented. So without having all the things that they have questioned, answered, then, this decision-making process is lacking.
Well,
information to make a decision.
So, Dr. Maya, here's what I would contribute to this part of the conversation. And I've said this many times on the show and out there in public. Any politician or any bureaucrat that thinks that they're getting something done with other politicians and other bureaucrats, they're full of it. Nothing's going to happen unless they have the support of the community. So even though, like Stan stated, Tyrone and Shantae are by themselves, they can easily be the people running the board and the superintendent if they reached out to the community and garner the community support. Because
but we're the ones is the votes. If it's 2 out of 7, 2 out of 9, that's only 20% percentile. That's only 20% of the vote. They cannot stop what's going to happen if they don't have the numbers. So if everybody else is voting in favor, then it's going to pass. So that's like anything in terms of the political process, in terms of votes.
So
Whoever has the most votes wins.
What they have to do is let us know how those votes are going to impact the community, how they're going to impact our children and our families. And then we can step up and say we don't agree with that.
Well, I think that they right, and I think they've done that. But to the point you were making about the information is there. I think that the rock stars are pulling that. They're asking the questions so that the audience, the community, can hear what their concern was, because it isn't that they don't have the information as much as it is that the information they've received they are not in agreement with, but the other 7 are. See, they have enough information for them to move forward. It's just not information that the decisions that they're making are not in alignment with the people who would, want to see something different. And so that requires the engaged community to make sure that they're doing what's necessary to put different types of people on that board.
Absolutely.
And not so much to call the rock stars, but call those who are the non-rock stars and hold them accountable. Because even though people might be appointed, they still live in the community. And this is why, the most this may come as a shock to some, but not to everyone. This is why boards of educations are so volatile. They are the single most volatile assembly of individuals in government, because you're dealing with people's children, and folk get tight quick, and people can go off in rage over, you get like road rage in a board meeting. That's why you have security, because folk can get tight.
Yeah.
All right, we get tight. We had one board member last week got tight up on the stage. and started addressing things. I thought she was talking to me.
What was she uptight about?
Someone had suggested something or said something about something, and she came back to the meeting and she was all tight and huffy and puffy and yelling and she was being real direct. So I took it like she was talking to me.
Oh wow.
That's crazy, man.
I was getting tight.
That energy transferring.
We can't have too many tight people in the room because it gets crazy.
Man. Tight.
You can't mix that Red Bull and coffee. I tell you that.
Right, I'm like, you talking to me? I'm looking. I said, she talking to me? Who's she talking about?
Name calling and fists flying.
It was at the end of the meeting though, but I was like, wait, hold up now.
Remember when Sam Saylor poured some water on somebody?
He threw water, yeah. That was over at High Street.
But he did it he did it because he felt that they were being racist and whatever and unfair.
Well, it doesn't really matter why. You start throwing water at people start picking up chairs next.
That's problematic.
Have a free for all.
An incredible show today, man. Thank you, Stan. I want to give a shout out to Eddie Griffin, Chuck Cummings, Cleve Royster, Jackie Bethea. They all down south now, man. Those were great people in Hartford that have moved down south, man. Thank you for your service to our great city, man. Appreciate y'all.
Oh, yeah.
Peace, family. Peace.
All right. So as we head into midterm season for the spring 2023 semester, may everyone that is in preparation for those exams ask the questions. Your instructors are not mind readers. So if you're stuck, the only way it is that we fill those gaps in is by you making the approach, having the appropriate questions, and filling in those gaps. Happy studies.
All right, happy studies. Happy studies to you. Remember Happy Trails?
Dr. Maya, that's the biggest cheese in America right now. Love it, man.
All right, my friends. Our time together has come to an end. We'll see you here next time. You all have a fabulous rest of your days. It should be up to like 49, 50 degrees. This is New England. Ain't no doubt about that. We'll see you all next time. We'll let Jay Hogart and company take us out. Ciao, ciao.
Peace.
All right, Dr. Maya, have a